return to the Redeemer. Let's say it together. Return to the Redeemer. Now, one thing that God has taught me over the years when it comes to ministering to other people, especially those who may be suffering, is that it's not a one-way street. It's not just about me helping poor you, okay? But that ministering to those who are hurting is actually a two-way street. That as we minister to them, we have to be open to how God is going to minister to us through them. Not a one-way street, it's a two-way street. How's God using that person in my life? Not just how God is using me in their life. Now, this is important because I want to show you what Jesus says as one of the Beatitudes in Matthew. He says in Matthew 5:3, blessed are the, let's say it together, the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. So what does it mean to be poor in spirit? Well, maybe a good place to start is what does it just mean to be poor economically? To be poor economically means that you don't have enough resources, sufficient resources, to be able to provide for your own needs. That's what it means to be economically poor. So then what does it mean to be spiritually poor? To be spiritually poor means that you don't have enough in you to make it to heaven on your own. It's not like, oh, I went to church 517 times over the last 10 years, so now I'm qualified to go to heaven. Oh, I passed the threshold of giving $750,000 to the church, now I'm granted heaven. To be poor in spirit is to recognize that you are spiritually inadequate to meet the demands of perfection which God requires to be able to enter into heaven. It means to recognize that we are spiritually bankrupt because all have sinned and all have fallen short of God's glory. That's what it means to be poor in spirit. To recognize, to humble ourselves before God and to recognize our own spiritual poverty. But that's just half the story. The other half of the story is now look to Christ for your salvation. Think about what Jesus did to save us. The King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, who owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, who held all the treasures in heaven. And what did he do? He emptied himself to become a man, a human being just like you and just like me. He was born in a palace, right? Is that where Jesus was born? Remember where Jesus was born? In a what? In a manger with animals. He grew up in Jerusalem, right? No. He grew up in Nazareth. Remember the offering they brought? Joseph and Mary, remember the offering they brought on the 8th day? It was 2 turtle doves. Look it up in the Old Testament. That was the offering reserved for the poorest people of society. Jesus emptied himself of all his treasures in heaven. Why did he do that? Remember what Jesus told the rich young ruler who thought he could earn himself to heaven, his way to heaven? He says, okay, you've kept all the commandments. Yeah, right, but that's okay. And he said, okay, well, you just got one more thing to do. Sell everything you have, give it to the poor, come follow me. And do you remember what happened to the rich young ruler? He walked away sorrowfully. Why? Because he had many possessions. But Jesus is the true rich young ruler because he took everything that he had and he sold it and he gave it to those who are poor in spirit. And that's you and that's me. Jesus became poor for us. You want to know why? So that through his death and through his resurrection, we could become rich in Jesus, amen, and experience every spirit. We may not get every physical blessing, but we've been guaranteed every spiritual blessing, amen. And because we are rich in Jesus, now we can be generous to the world.